The morning the HOA president tried to put a boot on my ranch gate, she did it with a tow truck, a clipboard, and a smile like she was about to repossess the sun. My foreman whispered, real quiet, that the men with her were carrying bolt cutters. Then the deputy she brought for intimidation stepped out, looked at my posted boundary sign, and muttered, "You people really did build a kingdom out here, didn't you?" That was the moment I knew this was not going to be a normal neighbor dispute. This was going to be a war over who got to pretend they owned my life. I live on a mega ranch, not the cute kind people picture when they say ranch. Not a little house with 2 horses and a decorative windmill for Instagram. I mean real land, real fences, real road miles, real equipment, real water rights, real gates that weigh more than most compact cars. The kind of property that makes delivery drivers call you for directions like they are navigating a desert. My place sits at the edge of a planned community that grew like a fungus over the last few years. It started as a few model homes and a sales office. Then came the marketing banners, the clubhouse, the pool, the fake lake with the fountain, and the HOA board with matching polos and the personality of a parking ticket. My ranch was here first. My deed is older than their whole development. My fence lines were surveyed before their community even had a name. I keep my land clean and maintained, and I run it like a business because it is one. Cattle, hay, equipment storage, seasonal hunting leases, a small solar field, and enough water infrastructure to make an engineer grin. The HOA hated that from day one. They did not hate my ranch because it was ugly. They hated it because it did not obey them. And when people like that realize they cannot control something, they either learn humility or they escalate until they break themselves. They escalated. It began with letters. It always begins with letters. The first one showed up in my mailbox with a bright blue logo and the words Community Standards Enforcement stamped like a threat. Inside, it said my fencing did not match approved neighborhood aesthetics and I needed to repaint it to a more welcoming color palette. I read it twice, thinking I had missed a joke. My fencing is 5-strand barbed wire on steel posts with sections of pipe fence where it matters. It is not a picket fence. It is not a decorative suggestion. It is a working boundary that keeps livestock in and strangers out. I walked into my office, dropped the letter on my desk, and called the number at the bottom just to hear a human voice admit this was real. A woman answered like she was smiling through the phone. "Thank you for calling Evergreen Lakes Community Association. How may I assist you?" I said, "You sent me a violation notice about my fence." "Yes, sir," she replied, "I see that in our system. The board is concerned the fencing is visually incompatible with the community." I looked out the window at my pasture. A pair of calves were trying to race each other like toddlers. Beyond them, my fence line ran clean and straight, exactly where the survey pins said it should. I said, "I am not in your community." There was a pause, like her brain was flipping pages. "Your property borders the community," she said, "and the board believes properties that impact the visual experience of residents should comply with community standard." I laughed, but it came out sharper than I meant. I said, "The visual experience of your residents is not my legal responsibility." Her tone tightened. "You may want to consult the covenants, sir." I said, "You may want to consult a map." Then I hung up. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I thought, okay, someone tried to act big, got corrected, and moved on. I underestimated how allergic some people are to being told no. The next letter was about my cattle. It said livestock noises were disturbing residents, and I needed to reduce the nuisance by relocating animals away from the boundary line. I stared at that one and actually felt my jaw tighten. That is when I realized I was dealing with someone who had never lived near anything more rural than a decorative potted plant. I did not call this time. I emailed their office, attached my deed, attached the county parcel map, and wrote one sentence. "I am not under your HOA jurisdiction. Do not contact me again, except through legal counsel." That should have ended it. Instead, it lit a fuse. The HOA president showed up 3 days later, in person, with a small group like she was leading a parade. I was out by the equipment shed, checking a hydraulic line on my tractor, when my ranch hand Malik drove up fast on the side-by-side. "Boss," he said, "you got company." At the front gate. I wiped my hands and rode with him, dust kicking up behind us. As we came around the bend, I saw them. A white SUV parked by my main gate. Another car behind it. A tow truck angled like it owned the place. And standing in front of my closed gate was a woman in a crisp blazer, sunglasses, and a smug expression so practiced it looked permanent. She held a clipboard like a weapon. Two men stood near her, both with tool belts. One of them was holding bolt cutters like he planned to audition for a break-in. Behind them, leaning against his patrol car, was a deputy. He looked bored, which is how deputies look right before something stupid becomes paperwork. I pulled up and stepped off the side-by-side. "Can I help you?" I asked. The woman turned her head slowly and smiled. Finally, she said, "The property owner. I am Marlene Whitaker, president of the Evergreen Lakes Homeowners Association." She said it like she expected applause. I said, "You are at my gate. On my easement. With bolt cutters." Marlene lifted the clipboard slightly. "We are here to address non-compliance issues and to install a community access device." I blinked once, slowly. "A community access device," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Residents have been complaining about your gate blocking what should be a public thoroughfare. You have effectively restricted access to the scenic route along the creek that our residents have enjoyed for years." I stared at her, trying to figure out which part of that sentence was the most insane. "Our residents," she continued, "have a right to enjoy the natural beauty of the area. Your gate is an obstruction." I pointed at the sign bolted to the gate. "Private ranch property. No trespassing. Video surveillance. Violators will be prosecuted." "Ma'am," he said, "this is private property. If you cut that lock, you are committing a crime." "I do not care what your clipboard says." Marlene's face stiffened. "We have authority," she snapped. "We manage this neighborhood." The deputy nodded once. "You manage your neighborhood," he said. "You do not manage this ranch." Marlene turned back to me, anger slipping through the cracks of her polished tone. "You have been hostile since day one," she said. "We have tried to work with you politely." I said, "You sent me letters telling me to repaint my fence and quiet my cows." Her mouth tightened. "The residents deserve a peaceful environment," she said. I leaned closer, just enough to make her step back half an inch without realizing it. I said, "Your residents moved next to a ranch. That is the environment." Marlene snapped her clipboard down against her thigh. "Fine," she said. "If you will not cooperate, we will proceed through proper channels." I said, "Good. Use proper channels. Not bolt cutters." She spun toward the tow truck driver. "You can go," she said sharply, "for now." The tow truck driver shrugged like he had already met this kind of woman and hated his life. Marlene pointed at me like she was filing me away as a future victim. "This is not over," she said. "The HOA will not be disrespected." I said, "You are standing at my gate trying to steal my road. You are disrespecting the concept of property ownership." Her face flushed, and she marched back to her SUV with her entourage following. The deputy lingered for a moment. He looked at me with the tired sympathy of a man who had seen a lot of petty power trips. "Sorry about that," he said. "They called it in like it was a community safety issue." I nodded. "Do me a favor," I said. "Put it in your report that she tried to cut my lock." He gave a short laugh. "Oh, I'll put it in there," he said. "Believe me." When they drove away, Malik let out a low whistle. "Boss," he said, "they really thought they could just take your gate." I stared down the ranch road, dust hanging in the air where their vehicles had been. I said, "They do not think. They assume." That afternoon, I called my attorney. I also called my surveyor, because I have learned a simple truth in rural life. When someone wants your land, the first thing they do is pretend the lines are blurry. My surveyor, an older guy named Ron with a voice like gravel and a memory like a filing cabinet, came out the next morning. We walked the boundary with GPS equipment while he pointed out the markers like we were visiting old friends. These pins have been here a long time, Ron said. Your fence is right where it should be. Their plat map stops at the creek. Everything beyond is yours. I said good. Because their HOA president just tried to install an access device on my gate. Ron snorted. People like that, he said, think a paper title is magic. By the end of the week, my attorney had sent a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board and their management company. It was clear, professional, and kind in the way a judge is kind when explaining consequences. You have no jurisdiction. You will not trespass. You will not attempt to alter property. Any further action will be treated as intentional interference and prosecuted accordingly. For a few days it got quiet. That is always the moment when you think maybe the universe has decided to be reasonable. Then my cameras caught Marlene again. Not at the gate this time. At the creek. She came with 2 teenagers and a man in a reflective vest, carrying a tape measure. They walked along the waterline like they were touring a new park. Marlene pointed at my far fence line and waved her hand like she was outlining a future. I watched the footage from my office, leaning forward as if that would make it less infuriating. They were measuring. They were planning. And Marlene, the HOA president, stood on my ranch land and smiled like she had already won. I paused the video on her face. Sunglasses on, chin lifted, the same expression as yesterday, but now with a new layer of confidence. She thought my cease and desist was bluff. She thought the deputy was a fluke. She thought my ranch was just a big yard that needed a manager. I sat back in my chair and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. If she wanted a war, I was not going to win it by yelling at the gate. I was going to win it the way ranchers win anything. With paperwork, cameras, patience, and the kind of consequences that make people wish they had stayed in their lane. I picked up my phone and called my attorney again. I said, they are on my land right now, measuring. I want the strongest legal response you can build. My attorney paused. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? He asked. I looked at the paused image of Marlene on my screen, standing on my creek bank like she owned the water. I said, it is already ugly. Now I just want it to be expensive for them. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a whisper. The cattle grazed. The ranch went on doing what it had done long before any HOA existed. And somewhere across the creek, a group of people in matching polos were planning their next move, convinced they could control a mega ranch with a clipboard. They had no idea what they had just stepped into. I said, that scenic route is my ranch road. It exists because I built it. It goes to my back pasture and water tank. Your residents do not get to enjoy it. They get to stay off it. Marlene's smile did not move, but her eyes sharpened. Our legal committee reviewed the matter, she said. That road has been used historically by the community. I laughed again, because what else do you do when someone lies to your face with confidence? I said, the community is 3 years old. My ranch road is older than your board members. One of the men with the bolt cutters shifted his weight, glancing at Marlene like he was waiting for the cue. Marlene tilted her chin. Deputy, she said, we are here to enforce a lawful community access requirement. The property owner is interfering. The deputy looked at me, then at my gate, then at the posted boundary marker on the fence post. A small metal sign with the surveyor's stamp and parcel number. He pushed off his car slowly and walked closer. Ma'am, he said, what exactly are you trying to do here? Install an access device, Marlene said, and remove the obstruction. The deputy's eyebrows lifted. So you want to cut his lock and modify his gate? Yes, she said, because it impacts the community. The deputy stared at her for a long second like she had just asked him to arrest the ocean. The first thing the HOA did after my attorney sent the cease and desist was pretend they had never received it. The second thing they did was invoice me. The bill arrived by certified mail, thick enough to feel insulting in my hand. Inside was a multi-page statement listing fines for non-compliant fencing, noise violations, obstruction of community access, and something called aesthetic degradation. They had even added late fees for violations I had supposedly ignored for months. I set the packet on my desk and stared at it until I started laughing again, that same sharp laugh that usually means someone is about to make a very expensive mistake. The total was 5 figures. I called my attorney and read it out loud. He did not laugh. "They are building a paper trail," he said. "Not a good one, but a loud one." That afternoon, the HOA put up signs. Not on my land. They were not that bold yet. They planted them just outside their boundary, right where their sidewalk ended and my gravel road began. Big green signs with white lettering that said Community Nature Access this way. Arrows pointed directly toward my gate. I drove down there with Malik and took photos. The signs were angled so that from the road it looked like my ranch road was part of their planned trail system. People slowed down to read them. A couple even stepped off the sidewalk and took pictures of the creek like tourists. That night, my cameras caught a jogger trying my gate handle. I watched the footage twice. The man jogged up, stopped, read my no trespassing sign, shrugged, and rattled the lock like it was a suggestion. When it did not open, he kicked the gate once in frustration and jogged away. The next morning, there was a Facebook post in the community group. "Why is the ranch owner blocking access to the creek? Does anyone know when the HOA is fixing this?" That post had dozens of comments by lunch. Some people defended me. Most of them did not. They talked about shared space and community spirit and how unfair it was that one landowner could block what nature intended to be public. One woman wrote that her kids loved walking by the water and now felt unsafe because of aggressive signage. Aggressive signage. I printed that one out and taped it to my corkboard. By the end of the week, Marlene sent a mass email to the entire HOA. One of the residents forwarded it to me with a note that said you might want to see this. Marlene's email was long and polished. She wrote about transparency and responsibility and community values. She wrote that the HOA was engaged in an ongoing dispute with a neighboring landowner who was refusing to cooperate. She did not name me, but she did not need to. She claimed the road along the creek had been historically used by residents. She claimed the HOA had a responsibility to restore access. She claimed legal review was underway. She ended the email with a sentence that made my attorney swear when I read it to him. "Please avoid confrontation with the ranch owner while we pursue enforcement through appropriate channels. In other words, keep trying to use the road, and let us handle the fallout." That same day, my surveyor called me. "Someone moved your stakes," Ron said. I felt my stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with focus. "Which ones?" I asked. "The creek boundary markers. 2 of them are off by about 12 feet. Someone pulled them and reset them closer to your side." I closed my eyes. "That is not an accident," Ron continued. "That is intentional. And it is illegal." I drove out to the creek with him an hour later. The water was low enough to see the bank clearly. Ron showed me the original GPS points and then the shifted stake. The difference was obvious when you knew what to look for. The new placement carved a narrow strip of my land into what would look like public access if you were squinting hard enough. My cameras covered that area. We pulled the footage. At 3 in the morning, a truck with no plates pulled up along the boundary road. 2 figures got out. One held a flashlight. The other carried a post puller. They worked fast and quiet. When they finished, the man with the flashlight pointed toward the creek and gave a thumbs up. Before they drove off, the driver opened the door. Marlene stepped out. She did not touch anything. She did not need to. She walked the line they had just altered, nodded once, and got back in the truck. Ron let out a low sound like a growl. "She just crossed from stupid into criminal," he said. I sent the footage to my attorney. He called me back within 10 minutes. "Do not talk to them," he said. "Do not confront them. We are filing for an emergency injunction." The injunction moved faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, a judge signed an order prohibiting the HOA from entering my property, altering boundaries, placing signage implying access, or communicating with residents about using my land. A sheriff's deputy served the order to the HOA office. Marlene did not take it well. She showed up again. This time, she stayed on her side of the fence. She stood just beyond the line, heels planted, arms crossed, staring at my gate like it had personally insulted her. She brought the same reflective vest man with her. He held rolled-up plans under his arm. I walked out and stopped 10 feet back from the fence. "You were served," I said. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Temporary orders are just that," she replied. "Temporary. You moved survey stakes," I said. "I have it on camera." Her smile twitched. "Your cameras invade our community's privacy," she said. I almost admired the commitment. "You were on my land," I said. "At night. With tools." She leaned forward slightly. "This is bigger than you," she said. "The county is watching. Developers are watching. You cannot wall yourself off forever." I said, "You committed a crime." She straightened. "We are pursuing a declaratory judgment," she said. "The HOA has a responsibility to ensure access to natural resources." The reflective vest man unrolled one of the plans and held it up so I could see. It was a trail layout. Switchbacks, benches, educational plaques. The trail ran straight through my back pasture. My attorney had warned me this might happen. When bullies get blocked, they try to reframe the fight as public interest. That night, flyers appeared in the neighborhood. Someone taped one to my gate. "Save our creek. Say no to greedy landowners." The comments online got uglier. People started calling my ranch a land grab, a relic, an obstacle to progress. I kept screenshots of everything. Then the county called. The planning department asked me to attend a meeting. They said there had been a petition. They said the HOA had requested a review of historical access claims along the creek corridor. I went to the meeting with my attorney, my surveyor, and a binder thick enough to hurt someone if I dropped it. Marlene was already there, sitting in the front row like she owned the room. She turned when she saw me and smiled that same practice smile. She thought the room was her stage. She thought the narrative was hers. She had no idea what I had brought with me. As the county officials took their seats and the meeting was called to order, I opened my binder to the first tab. Video evidence. I glanced at Marlene one last time before the presentation began. She looked confident, relaxed, victorious. That confidence lasted exactly 7 minutes, because when the screen lit up and her face appeared on camera, standing on my land at 3 a.m. while her people moved boundary stakes, the room went completely silent. And that was when the war stopped being about a gate. The silence in that meeting room felt heavy enough to bend metal. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed and immediately regretted it. The county planner at the front stared at the paused frame on the screen like it had personally offended him. Marlene did not turn around at first. She sat perfectly still, back straight, hands folded, pretending that if she did not acknowledge the image, it might dissolve on its own. The planner cleared his throat. "Is that the HOA president?" he asked, pointing at the screen. I did not answer. I did not need to. Everyone in that room already knew. The planner looked down the table at his colleagues. One of them leaned closer to the screen, squinting. "Timestamp is 3:14 a.m., she said. "Parcel ID matches the ranch property." My attorney finally spoke. "That footage shows the HOA president present during the illegal relocation of survey markers on my client's land," he said calmly. "We have GPS logs, original plats, and sworn statements from a licensed surveyor confirming tampering." Marlene turned then. Slowly. Her expression was not shock. It was offense, like the room had broken an unspoken rule by daring to question her. "This is being taken out of context," she said. "I was there to observe, not to participate." The planner raised an eyebrow. "At 3 a.m, he asked. She held his gaze. "We were documenting encroachment concerns," she said. The room did not buy it. I could feel the shift, the moment when authority recalibrates. Power hates embarrassment, especially public embarrassment backed by evidence. The county attorney leaned forward. Ms. Whitaker, she said, you are aware that altering survey markers is a felony offense. Marlene's jaw tightened. No markers were altered by me, she replied. The county attorney tapped the screen with her pen. Your presence establishes intent and oversight, she said. That is not a gray area. For the first time, Marlene looked rattled. Not panicked. Not yet. But the polish cracked. The planner shut off the projector. This meeting was scheduled to review access claims, he said. Based on what we have just seen, that issue is tabled indefinitely. There will be a separate investigation into HOA conduct. Marlene shot to her feet. You cannot just dismiss this, she snapped. Our residents have rights. The planner met her glare. So do landowners, he said, including the right not to have their boundaries altered at night. The meeting ended abruptly after that. No applause. No victory speeches. Just quiet conversations and a lot of people avoiding eye contact with Marlene as they filed out. She waited until the room was nearly empty before approaching me. You think you won, she said softly. I said nothing. This is far from over, she continued. The HOA has resources, legal teams, political connections. I finally looked at her. You committed a crime on camera, I said. This stopped being about opinions. Her eyes hardened. People like you, she said, think land makes you untouchable. I said no. Evidence does. She walked away without another word. I should have known that was the moment she decided to stop pretending to play by rules. 2 days later, the HOA filed a lawsuit. They did not sue me directly for access. That would have failed instantly. Instead, they sued over nuisance, claiming my ranch operations created excessive noise, odor, dust, and traffic that reduced property values. They attached photos of cattle near the fence line. Dust clouds from harvest season. My equipment parked near my own barn. They even included a picture of my foreman smoking a cigarette by the gate, labeled unsafe activity. The complaint was thick, dramatic, and deliberately expensive to respond to. My attorney read it and shook his head. This is retaliation, he said. They are trying to bleed you into compliance. At the same time, the HOA board voted to impose a special assessment on residents to fund legal action. Marlene sold it as a necessary defense against an unreasonable neighbor. Some residents started pushing back. A few emailed me quietly, apologizing. One admitted they had not known the road was private. Another said Marlene had told them the county supported the trail plan. But fear is a powerful motivator. Most stayed silent. Then the inspectors came. Fire safety first. A man with a clipboard and a reflective vest showed up and said he had received a complaint about improper fuel storage. He walked my property for 2 hours, took notes, and left without citing a single violation. Environmental health followed. They tested water runoff near the creek. Everything passed. Zoning enforcement came next. They checked my permits. All valid. Each visit felt coordinated. Each inspector was polite but wary, like they had been told I was dangerous. My attorney documented everything. Paper cuts, he said. They are hoping one of these sticks. It did not. What did stick was the trespassing. Despite the injunction, people kept showing up at the creek. Couples, dog walkers, kids on bikes. Most claimed ignorance. Some were hostile. One man told Malik that public land belonged to everyone and tried to shove past him. I installed additional cameras and signs. Larger ones. Clearer ones. Trespassing enforced. Violators will be prosecuted. That only seemed to inflame things. Someone spray-painted greed on one of my fence panels overnight. Another time, they dumped trash bags near the gate like a protest offering. The sheriff took reports. Nothing immediate came of it. Then the cattle gate was left open. I got the alert just after midnight. Motion sensor triggered. Gate status changed. By the time Malik and I got there, 3 calves were already wandering toward the road. Headlights flashed as a car slammed on brake. We managed to herd them back, hearts pounding, adrenaline hot in our veins. On camera, the footage was clear. A woman in a hoodie approached the gate, hesitated, then lifted the latch and stepped back into the dark. Even with the hood, I recognized her walk. Marlene. I sent the clip to my attorney with a single message. She is escalating. The next morning, my attorney requested a modification to the injunction. Criminal contempt. Enhanced penalties. Trespass charges. The judge did not hesitate. A warrant was issued. It was not dramatic. No sirens at dawn. No cameras. Just a sheriff's deputy knocking on Marlene's door that afternoon. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that night. I did not attend, but one of the residents streamed it live in the community group. Marlene stood at the podium, voice tight, accusing, defiant. "This is intimidation," she said. "They are trying to silence us." A board member interrupted her. "Marlene," he said, "is it true there is a warrant?" The room went still. She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second too long. "It is a misunderstanding," she said. Another board member stood. "We need to step back," he said. "This has gone too far." Residents started shouting. Questions flew. Demands for answers. Accusations of lies. The stream cut out when someone knocked the phone away. By morning, Marlene had resigned. The HOA hired an interim president and issued a statement claiming they were unaware of any misconduct. They suspended all legal action pending review. My attorney called me just after lunch. "They are offering to settle," he said. I looked out at the pasture. The cattle were calm. The wind moved the grass in slow waves. "What kind of settlement?" I asked. "They will withdraw the lawsuit, issue a public retraction, and pay your legal fees to date," he said. "They want this gone." I thought about the gate, the flyers, the trespassers, the open latch in the dark. "No," I said. There was a pause. "I am not interested in quiet," I continued. "I am interested in consequences." My attorney exhaled slowly. "Then we keep going," he said. That night, the county announced a formal investigation into the HOA's governance practices. Financial audits, authority overreach, improper use of funds. Residents started posting questions online. Where did the legal money go? Who approved the assessments? Why were they paying for a trail on land the HOA did not own? The narrative cracked. And once a story cracks, it does not stop spreading. I watched the sun set over my ranch, the sky burning orange and red, and felt something shift again. Marlene had wanted control. What she triggered instead was exposure. And the fallout was only beginning. By the time the county audit became public, the HOA board was no longer speaking with one voice. It fractured the way brittle things always do, suddenly and loudly, with everyone insisting they had never really agreed with the direction things took. The first sign of real collapse came in the form of emails. Not official ones. Private ones. Residents started reaching out directly, cautious at first, then bolder. One asked if I would drop charges if they replaced the board. Another admitted Marlene had pressured them to sign statements about noise they had never actually complained about. A third said she had been told the trail plan was already approved by the county and that my ranch was the only obstacle left. That last one made my attorney laugh. "She told people it was a done deal," he said. "That is going to hurt her." The interim HOA president requested a meeting. Neutral location. No cameras. No dramatics. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see what desperation looked like in a room without microphones. They showed up with 3 board members and their attorney. No matching polos this time. No smiles. We sat at a long conference table while their attorney cleared his throat and launched into an apology that had clearly been written to offend as little as possible. "The board regrets the escalation," he said. "Certain actions were taken without full authorization." I leaned back and let him talk. He went on about misunderstandings, poor leadership decisions, and the desire to restore harmony. When he finally paused, the interim president leaned forward. "We want to put this behind us," she said. "We are prepared to formally acknowledge your property rights and ensure no further interference." I looked at her. "And the people who interfered?" I asked. She hesitated. Marlene is no longer president, she said. I waited. The board member to her left shifted uncomfortably. She is still on the board, he admitted. That told me everything. I slid a folder across the table. It contained still frames from my cameras, survey reports, copies of invoices, emails from residents, the warrant notice. You want this behind you, I said. Then you need to put it in front of everyone. They flipped through the pages, expressions tightening with every turn. This is serious, their attorney said quietly. Yes, I said. It is. I stood. Here is what happens next. The HOA withdraws every complaint. Publicly. You issue a written acknowledgement that the ranch is private property with no access right. You remove all signage implying otherwise. You refund the special assessment. And you cooperate fully with the county investigation. The interim president swallowed. And Marlene, she asked. I met her eyes. You let the process deal with her, I said. But if the HOA tries to shield her, I keep pushing. Harder. They did not agree right away. They asked for time. I gave them 48 hours. They used every minute. On the second day, the audit findings leaked. Someone inside the county released preliminary numbers to a local reporter. The headline hit online by noon. HOA funds used for unauthorized legal action and private survey work. The article mentioned the trail project, the invoices, the after-hours survey work, the absence of board votes authorizing expenses. Marlene's name appeared 5 times. The comments section exploded. Residents demanded refunds. Some demanded criminal charges. Others wanted the entire board removed. That night, a recall vote was scheduled. It passed. The board was dissolved. By the end of the week, the HOA management company terminated its contract, citing governance failures. The county froze HOA accounts pending further review. Marlene stopped posting online. Her social media went dark. I thought that would be the end of her. I was wrong. She came back one last time, not with paperwork or authority, but with spite. It happened early, just before sunrise. My cameras picked up headlights near the back pasture. A vehicle pulled up along the fence line where the creek curved out of sight. I watched the feed from my kitchen, coffee untouched in my hand. Marlene stepped out of the car alone. No hoodie this time. No helpers. She walked up to the fence and stood there, staring across the pasture like she was trying to memorize it. Then she pulled out her phone and started recording. I did not know what she was saying, but I did not need audio to understand the posture. Chin up. Shoulders squared. Performing for an invisible audience. She walked along the fence, pointing, gesturing, narrating. Then she crossed the line. She stepped onto my land and kept filming. I was already in the truck before the camera alert finished pinging. When I pulled up, she did not run. She turned slowly, phone still up, recording my approach like this was her final act. You cannot silence me, she said loudly. This is corruption. This is theft. I stopped a few feet away. You are trespassing, I said. She laughed. Everyone needs to see this, she said. You think you can hide behind gates forever. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I called the sheriff. She kept talking, pacing, ranting about power and land hoarders and communities being robbed of nature. She was unraveling in real time, the performance slipping into something raw and desperate. The deputy arrived quickly. Same one from before. Ma'am, he said, you have been warned repeatedly. She turned on him, pointing her phone. See, she said. This is how they do it. The deputy did not flinch. Turn off the phone and step back across the fence, he said. She refused. He took the phone from her hand. She screamed then. Not words. Just sound. Rage spilling out. He arrested her without drama. As they drove away, the sun crested the horizon, light spilling across the pasture. The cattle barely looked up. Later that day, her arrest record went public. Trespass. Criminal contempt. Evidence tampering. The county added obstruction to the investigation. The story spread beyond the community. Local news picked it up. Then regional. By the end of the month, the HOA was insolvent. Insurance dropped them. Legal bills piled up. Residents voted to dissolve the association entirely. The gates to the fake lake were padlocked. The clubhouse closed. The signs came down. One afternoon, Malik and I watched workers remove the community nature access sign. He shook his head. All this, he said, because she wanted a road. I nodded. Control, I said. Not a road. The ranch settled back into its rhythm. Quiet. Ordered. Unbothered. But the consequences kept moving, slow and thorough. Because when people try to steal land with a clipboard, they forget one thing. Land remembers. And so does the law. The dissolution of the HOA did not bring peace the way people imagine it does. There was no clean ending, no moment where everything snapped back into place and the world nodded in approval. What it brought instead was fallout, messy and human and loud. Without the HOA acting as a buffer, the community fractured into factions almost overnight. Some residents were relieved. Others were furious. And a few were desperate to find someone else to blame. That someone, for a while, was me. My name showed up in angry posts and whispered conversations at the local hardware store. People said I had destroyed their neighborhood, that I had forced the HOA into extinction, that their property values would suffer because of one stubborn ranch owner who would not share. I let it happen. My attorney asked if I wanted to issue a statement. I told him no. The story was already too loud. Any response from me would only feed it. Instead, I focused on documentation. Every invoice, every report, every email, every video clip. We organized it all, not for court, but for the county review board that was now digging through the remains of the HOA like archaeologists at a disaster site. The deeper they dug, the worse it looked. Unauthorized contracts, falsified meeting minutes, legal expenses approved retroactively, payments to surveyors without permit, special assessments collected without proper vote. Marlene's fingerprints were on all of it, but she had not acted alone. 2 former board members were called in for questioning. One admitted under oath that Marlene had instructed them to backdate approvals. Another confessed that they had been told the ranch road was legally ambiguous and that pushing access would force a settlement. Force. That word showed up again and again. The county attorney filed charges. Not just against Marlene, but against the HOA as an entity and the management company that failed to intervene. Civil penalties stacked up. Criminal referrals followed. The news cycle loved it. Headlines shifted from a land dispute to corruption. From a stubborn ranch owner to a cautionary tale about power without oversight. I stopped being the villain and became a footnote. That was when the letters started arriving. Not from the HOA. From residents. Handwritten ones. Careful ones. Apologies folded into envelopes like confessions. One man wrote that he had voted for the special assessment because Marlene said the trail would raise property values. Another woman admitted she had complained about cattle noise because she felt pressured to support the board. A few asked if they could walk the creek again. I did not respond to those. But I did something else. I worked with the county conservation office, quietly, without press. The creek was already protected under existing regulations. I agreed to formalize that protection. Riparian buffers. Habitat preservation. No public access, but guaranteed environmental stewardship. The county liked that. They issued a report stating the ranch had exceeded conservation requirements for years. That report mattered more than any statement I could have made. Meanwhile, Marlene's situation deteriorated. Her attorney withdrew. Then her second attorney did too. She appeared in court alone at one hearing, arguing that she had acted in the community's best interest. The judge did not entertain it. Intent does not excuse conduct, he said. Especially when conduct involves trespass and evidence tampering. She was ordered to pay fines. Heavy ones. She was barred from serving on any HOA board in the county for 10 years. The criminal case moved slower, but it moved. One afternoon, Malik came into my office with his phone in his hand. "Boss," he said, "you might want to see this." It was a post from Marlene. Her account had reappeared. She wrote about injustice, about being scapegoated, about how power silences truth. The comments were not kind. People posted screenshot, court documents, video stills of her at my fence. Someone wrote, "You did this to yourself." She deleted the post within an hour. A week later, she sold her house. A moving truck pulled up to the curb early in the morning. No fanfare. No goodbye messages. I watched from a distance as the truck drove away, her chapter in the neighborhood closing without ceremony. I thought I would feel satisfaction. What I felt instead was something quieter. Relief. The ranch had not changed. The land did not care. It had endured far worse than a clipboard tyrant. But I had changed. I had learned how fragile authority becomes when it relies on assumption instead of law. How quickly confidence collapses when it is built on other people's compliance. And I learned something else. Power does not always roar. Sometimes it sends letters. Sometimes it posts signs. Sometimes it smiles while holding bolt cutters. Late that month, the county issued its final report. The HOA was officially dissolved. Assets liquidated to cover penalties and refunds. Any remaining funds returned to residents. The fake lake became a drainage basin. The clubhouse was sold. The signs were gone. The community became just a neighborhood again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I walked the fence line by the creek. The water moved slowly, the way it always had. The grass had already grown back where stakes had been pulled. I stopped at the spot where Marlene had crossed the line that last time. There was no marker anymore. No sign. Just earth. I turned back toward the ranch, boots crunching softly on gravel, and felt the weight of the past months lift a little more. The fight was almost over. But consequences, real ones, do not end with a signature. They ripple. And the final ripple had not reached the shore yet. The ripple arrived the way most serious consequences do, quietly and without drama, disguised as routine. It came as a letter from the state. Not the county. Not the court. The state regulatory board that oversees homeowners associations, property management firms, and licensed community managers. The kind of board most people never think about until it ruins someone's career. They requested documentation. All of it. Not just what the county had already reviewed, but communications, invoices, video evidence, and sworn statements related to HOA authority abuse and coordinated enforcement actions. They wanted timelines, names, decisions, motive. My attorney smiled when he read it. "This is where it stops being local," he said. We cooperated fully. Again. The state investigation widened fast. Too fast for anyone who had hoped this would quietly fade now that Marlene was gone. It turned out Evergreen Lakes was not unique. The same management company had contracts with 6 other HOAs in neighboring development. Same template. Same enforcement language. Same aggressive posture toward adjacent landowners. Different targets. Same playbook. The board discovered that Marlene had attended multiple regional HOA leadership workshops run by a consulting firm that taught something they called assertive jurisdiction expansion. That phrase alone made the investigators pause. Expansion meant pushing boundaries. Literally. They framed it as protecting community interests, increasing shared value, leveraging historical use. It was a strategy designed to test limits, knowing most landowners would fold rather than fight. Most did. I had not. Emails surfaced showing Marlene bragging about previous successes. Access easements extracted through pressure. Landowners worn down by fines and complaints. One message read, "They never want the hassle, just make it expensive enough." That email became Exhibit A. The state suspended the management company's license pending review. Every HOA under their control scrambled overnight. Phones rang. Meetings were called. Lawyers were hired. People realized, too late, that they had outsourced power to firms that thrived on conflict. Evergreen Lakes residents were furious. Not at me anymore. At themselves. They had trusted authority because it wore a blazer and spoke confidently. They had believed stories because they were told often and loudly. Now refunds were delayed. Services were frozen. Common areas were neglected. A neighborhood built on control had lost it entirely. One afternoon, I received a call from a former board member. Not Marlene. One of the quieter ones. He sounded exhausted. She told us you would cave, he said. That everyone caves eventually. I did not respond. We thought we were protecting our investment, he continued. Turns out we were just helping her play landlord with someone else's land. That was the closest thing to an apology I needed. The criminal case finally reached its turning point when the state added charges. Conspiracy to commit trespass. Fraudulent misrepresentation. Abuse of authority. Marlene took a plea deal. No jail time. Heavy fines. Probation. Permanent ban from HOA leadership statewide. Mandatory restitution tied to the dissolved association. Her name was added to a registry that most people never know exists until they end up on it. I did not attend the hearing. I read the summary later, sitting at my desk while the ranch went about its day. Cattle moved. Wind shifted. A hawk circled. The world did not stop because one person lost her illusion of power. The final ripple came from an unexpected place. The developer. The company that built Evergreen Lakes reached out through their legal counsel. Polite. Careful. They wanted to talk about access. Not to my land. To reality. They admitted that Marlene's behavior had damaged their brand. Sales had slowed. Buyers asked questions about HOA abuse. About lawsuit. About governance. They wanted distance. We are re-evaluating our approach to future developments, the attorney said. There is interest in incorporating clearer boundaries with adjacent landowners. I said nothing for a moment. Then I said, put it in writing. They did. The document acknowledged my ranch as independent and unrestricted by any present or future HOA authority. It committed the developer to notify buyers in writing that the creek corridor was private property with no access right. It was recorded with the county. Permanent. That was when it finally felt finished. Not because I had won. Because the system had corrected itself. One evening, Malik and I sat on the tailgate watching the sky fade from gold to purple. You think anyone will try this again? He asked. I shrugged. Someone always does, I said. But not this way. Not here. He nodded. They learned, he said. I watched the fence line stretch into the distance, straight and quiet. No signs. No arrows. No clipboards. Just land doing what it has always done. I thought about how close it all came to turning out differently. How easy it would have been to ignore the first letter. To laugh and toss it aside. To assume reason would prevail. Power counts on that assumption. It counts on people being tired. Busy. Willing to compromise peace for quiet. I stood and brushed dust from my hand. Let's lock up, I said. The gate closed with a familiar weight. Solid. Final. And for the first time in months, I did not feel like I was guarding something. I felt like I was simply standing on what was mine. The quiet that followed felt unfamiliar, like a room after the music cuts out and everyone realizes how loud it had been. For weeks, my phone barely rang. No alerts from cameras. No letters. No meetings. Just the steady rhythm of the ranch doing what it had always done. That was when I started noticing the small things. The joggers stopped appearing at the fence line. The bikes stayed on the sidewalks. The creek returned to being just a creek instead of a symbol. Grass grew back where signs had once stood, thin at first, then thick enough to hide the scars if you did not know where to look. The neighbors adjusted too. Without an HOA, people had to talk to each other again. Some did it awkwardly. Some avoided it altogether. A few discovered they preferred freedom to rules. One afternoon, a man from the former community walked up to my gate and stopped at the sign. He did not touch it. He waited. I met him there. I just wanted to say, he began, then stopped and cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize. We believed a lot of things that were not true. I nodded. He hesitated. The creek, he said. We miss it. But we understand now. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. The county finalized its oversight report shortly after. It was dry, technical, brutally thorough. Evergreen Lakes was cited as a case study in governance failure. Improper authority claims, misuse of funds, retaliatory enforcement. They recommended changes. Mandatory education for HOA board members. Stronger disclosure requirements. Clear penalties for boundary interference. I read it once and set it aside. That part was not for me. The personal reckoning came later, when my attorney called to close out the last file. That is it, he said. No appeals. No outstanding actions. I thanked him and hung up. I expected relief. Instead, I felt tired. Not physically. The kind of tired that settles in after you have been alert for too long, waiting for something to break. I took a long ride that evening. Drove the perimeter road slowly, checking fences, watching the sun dip low. The land felt unchanged, but I knew better. Conflict leaves residue. I stopped at the creek again. The water moved the same way it always had, but I noticed how much I had come to associate it with arguments and cameras and court filings. That would fade. Time handles those things better than people do. A week later, a package arrived. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a binder. Court documents. Email chains. Meeting notes. And a handwritten letter. It was from one of the former HOA board members. Not Marlene. The quiet one. He wrote that he could not sleep. That he had replayed meetings in his head, moments where he should have spoken up and did not. That he had watched authority become something ugly and had helped it along by staying silent. He included documents he had kept. Things he did not know what to do with at the time. They were redundant now. The case was over. But the gesture mattered. I filed them anyway. The last confrontation came not with Marlene, not with the HOA, but with myself. I had spent months reacting, responding, defending. Now there was nothing to push against. I had to decide what came next. The answer arrived without effort. Work. The ranch needed attention. Fences needed repair. Equipment needed servicing. A new water line needed trenching. Normal things. I threw myself into it. Physical work has a way of grounding thoughts that spiral. The smell of cut grass. The sound of metal on metal. The simple satisfaction of finishing something tangible. One morning, as I was welding a hinge on a gate panel, Malik leaned on the fence watching. "You missed the fight?" he asked. I laughed. "No," I said. "I miss not thinking about it." He grinned. "That will come," he said. He was right. Slowly, the story stopped being something people asked me about. It turned into something they remembered vaguely, then not at all. The ranch returned to being a place instead of a headline. I drove past the former HOA office one day. The building was empty. The sign removed. A for lease banner hung crookedly in the window. I did not stop. There was nothing left to say. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. The sky felt wider than it had in months. I thought about how close the line is between order and control, between leadership and entitlement, and how easily people hand over authority when they believe it will protect them. The lesson stayed with me. Not as bitterness, as clarity. The fight had stripped everything down to fundamentals. Who owns what? Who decides? Who is willing to stand their ground when someone else insists they know better? I finished my drink and stood, the boards creaking under my boot. Tomorrow would be another day of work. Quiet. Ordinary. And that, after everything, felt like the real victory. The quiet that followed felt unfamiliar, like a room after the music cuts out and everyone realizes how loud it had been. For weeks, my phone barely rang. No alerts from cameras. No letters. No meetings. Just the steady rhythm of the ranch doing what it had always done. That was when I started noticing the small things. The joggers stopped appearing at the fence line. The bikes stayed on the sidewalks. The creek returned to being just a creek instead of a symbol. Grass grew back where signs had once stood, thin at first, then thick enough to hide the scars if you did not know where to look. The neighbors adjusted too. Without an HOA, people had to talk to each other again. Some did it awkwardly. Some avoided it altogether. A few discovered they preferred freedom to rules. One afternoon, a man from the former community walked up to my gate and stopped at the sign. He did not touch it. He waited. I met him there. I just wanted to say, he began, then stopped and cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize. We believed a lot of things that were not true. I nodded. He hesitated. The creek, he said. We miss it. But we understand now. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. The county finalized its oversight report shortly after. It was dry, technical, brutally thorough. Evergreen Lakes was cited as a case study in governance failure. Improper authority claims, misuse of funds, retaliatory enforcement. They recommended changes. Mandatory education for HOA board members. Stronger disclosure requirements. Clear penalties for boundary interference. I read it once and set it aside. That part was not for me. The personal reckoning came later, when my attorney called to close out the last file. That is it, he said. No appeals. No outstanding actions. I thanked him and hung up. I expected relief. Instead, I felt tired. Not physically. The kind of tired that settles in after you have been alert for too long, waiting for something to break. I took a long ride that evening. Drove the perimeter road slowly, checking fences, watching the sun dip low. The land felt unchanged, but I knew better. Conflict leaves residue. I stopped at the creek again. The water moved the same way it always had, but I noticed how much I had come to associate it with arguments and cameras and court filings. That would fade. Time handles those things better than people do. A week later, a package arrived. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a binder. Court documents. Email chains. Meeting notes. And a handwritten letter. It was from one of the former HOA board members. Not Marlene. The quiet one. He wrote that he could not sleep. That he had replayed meetings in his head, moments where he should have spoken up and did not. That he had watched authority become something ugly and had helped it along by staying silent. He included documents he had kept. Things he did not know what to do with at the time. They were redundant now. The case was over. But the gesture mattered. I filed them anyway. The last confrontation came not with Marlene, not with the HOA, but with myself. I had spent months reacting, responding, defending. Now there was nothing to push against. I had to decide what came next. The answer arrived without effort. Work. The ranch needed attention. Fences needed repair. Equipment needed servicing. A new water line needed trenching. Normal things. I threw myself into it. Physical work has a way of grounding thoughts that spiral. The smell of cut grass. The sound of metal on metal. The simple satisfaction of finishing something tangible. One morning, as I was welding a hinge on a gate panel, Malik leaned on the fence watching. "You missed the fight?" he asked. I laughed. "No," I said. "I miss not thinking about it." He grinned. "That will come," he said. He was right. Slowly, the story stopped being something people asked me about. It turned into something they remembered vaguely, then not at all. The ranch returned to being a place instead of a headline. I drove past the former HOA office one day. The building was empty. The sign removed. A for lease banner hung crookedly in the window. I did not stop. There was nothing left to say. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. The sky felt wider than it had in months. I thought about how close the line is between order and control, between leadership and entitlement, and how easily people hand over authority when they believe it will protect them. The lesson stayed with me. Not as bitterness, as clarity. The fight had stripped everything down to fundamentals. Who owns what? Who decides? Who is willing to stand their ground when someone else insists they know better? I finished my drink and stood, the boards creaking under my boot. Tomorrow would be another day of work. Quiet. Ordinary. And that, after everything, felt like the real victory. The final consequence did not come with noise or headlines. It arrived the way endings usually do, quietly enough that you only recognize them when you are already standing on the other side. It was a deed correction. The county recorder called to confirm I would be present. They wanted the record clean. Not just accurate, but unmistakable. The document clarified every boundary, every easement, every access point. It referenced surveys older than the town itself. It eliminated ambiguity the way a surgeon removes doubt, precisely and permanently. When it was recorded, the creek corridor was no longer just mine by history or practice. It was mine on paper in a way that would outlive everyone involved. That mattered. Because entitlement does not die with embarrassment. It waits for confusion. The county clerk slid the stamped copy across the counter. The ink was still fresh. This should prevent future disputes, she said. I nodded. It will, I replied. Because now there is nothing left to misinterpret. Driving back to the ranch, I passed the old entrance to Evergreen Lake. The sign frame was still there, empty, bolts rusting where the name once hung. Grass had begun to grow through the cracks in the pavement. A neighborhood without a gate, without a board, without anyone pretending to manage the sky. Life had gone on. Houses were still lived in. Lawns were still mowed. Kids still rode bike. Nothing collapsed. That was the lie Marlene never understood. Control is not the same as stability. That afternoon, I walked the creek one last time with intention. Not to check cameras. Not to document anything. Just to walk. The water moved slow and steady, reflecting the sky in broken pieces. Birds flitted along the bank. Tracks marked the mud where deer had passed in the night. This land had been here before me. It would be here after me. That was the point. Ownership is not domination. It is responsibility with limit. I stopped where the false stakes had once been moved. The earth was smooth now, grass fully returned. If you did not know, you would never guess what had happened here. I liked that. Some lessons deserve to fade. Others do not. The phone buzzed once in my pocket. A text from my attorney. Recorded and finalized. Congratulations. I typed back a single word. Thanks. Then I put the phone away. The ranch had settled into a new rhythm, one that did not include waiting for the next escalation. The gates stayed closed. The cameras stayed on. But they were no longer my focus. They were just tools again. One evening, Malik brought up something I had been thinking about too. You ever notice, he said, how people with the loudest rules usually understand the least? I smiled. Rules are easy, I said. Responsibility is harder. He nodded. That woman, he said. She never wanted the land. She wanted obedience. Exactly, I replied. The story ended up circulating for a while longer, stripped of names, reshaped by rumor. Some versions painted me as a hero. Others still tried to make me the villain. I did not correct either. Truth does not need defending once it is written into law. Months passed. New families moved into the neighborhood. They asked different questions. About schools. About utilities. About commute times. No one asked about the creek. That told me everything. On the first anniversary of the day Marlene showed up with bolt cutters, I stood at the main gate as the sun rose. The metal was cool under my hand. Solid. Familiar. Nothing dramatic happened. And that was the victory. No one came. No letters arrived. No authority tried to borrow itself into existence. The ranch breathed. Quiet and whole. I thought about how close it had come to going another way. How easily exhaustion could have made me compromise. How tempting it would have been to open the gate just to make the noise stop. That is how entitlement wins. Not by force. By attrition. Standing your ground does not always look brave. Most of the time it looks boring. Paperwork. Patience. Refusal to be rushed into someone else's emergency. The cost is time. The reward is permanence. I closed the gate and turned back toward the house. The day was waiting. Work needed doing. Ordinary work. The kind that builds instead of react. Behind me, the fence line stretched clean and uninterrupted, following the land the way it always had. No arrows. No signs. No imagined authority. Just boundaries that were finally respected. And that, in the end, cost the HOA everything.